One common thread which bonds most Adam gals together, besides good taste in cowboys, is their shared feeling for one character. Ranging from grating annoyance to full-blown hatred, Laura Dayton has very few fans amongst the crowd of Bonanza lovers. My hope for this video today is to take a fair and balanced look at why this is, and in the interest of that fairness, find some things which make her a sympathetic character and actually try to find some things about her to like. After all, she is in 4 episodes total, and if you love an Adam-centric episode, you don't really want to miss that much Adam if you don't have to. A note for you Joe gals, Ben gals, and Hoss gals. Feel free to skip class today, or if you're mildly curious, do stick around. Also, a note for those who decide to stay. I'm going to put it out there now that at no time, though I will criticize Laura, will I be saying anything disrespectful of Kathy Brown, her actress. By all accounts, she was a nice lady, and I'm sure she gave it her all. I don't believe an actor is at fault if their character is disliked, even if that character was not meant to be adversarial. Also, I did my rewatch of all the Laura episodes before making this video, and do have some thoughts that I might not have had before. We're introduced to Laura in the waiting game, but before we even meet her, we meet her husband Frank and daughter Peggy, respectively. In the very first scene, her husband dies because he's drunk while riding his horse across the Ponderosa to get home. His horse stumbles and Frank hits his head on a rock, dying instantly. When we meet Laura, we find out that the Cartwrights have known her as a neighbor for some time, and also that she has had 4 months since her husband's death to tell their young daughter about it, and she still hasn't. She's told Peggy that her father is away on a long trip, somehow thinking the child is just going to keep accepting the excuse until she's older, I guess. And I guess figures out for herself that he's dead at some point eventually. Okay, so here we come to my first and most glaring issue with Laura as a person. Her parenting. This part kind of goes away after this episode, but she has this death stare that she's able to give this little girl every time she talks about missing and loving her daddy. If looks could kill, I think everyone watching the show would have died by exposure to that look. She seems to take issue with the fact that this child loves a man who is flawed in more ways than a girl her age is able to understand. I'm sorry, but I don't care what your marital issues are. If you can't see how nonsensical it is to blame a child for not seeing those same issues, you are a bad parent. It gets a little confusing because she acts like she loves her to pieces and doesn't want to hurt her, while those looks and flashes of anger seem to indicate the polar opposite. We later meet Frank's mistress, who tells Adam that Frank had plans to leave with Peggy. And my visceral reaction, like Adam's, is to think that it's horrible and wrong. That being said, I do kind of see why thinking Laura is a bad mother isn't too far of a reach. Of course, that isn't the excuse that this unnamed woman gives, but we'll talk about that in the review video when the time comes. The other massive issue adding to the parenting argument is when Laura basically forces Adam, a neighbor who is not family, and whose only interaction thus far with this child consisted of her screaming at him and telling him she hates him for sitting in her daddy's chair and taking her mother to a dance without her daddy, to be the one to tell Peggy that her father has died, because Laura can't bring herself to do it, stating it's because the kid has always been closer to her father than to her mother. Yep, you heard me right. The kid is a daddy's girl, like a lot of little girls, and so that means that her mother can't talk to her about anything. Honestly, Adam's facial expressions throughout this exchange do more to convey my feelings than even I can right now. Then she has the nerve to look like she's going to start criticizing his methods when Peggy comes home and runs upstairs without speaking to her, so she knows something went wrong. Moving on to the second installment of the saga, which is called The Cheating Game, Laura allows Peggy to see her crying because Adam doesn't drop to his knees and propose to her when she tells him that the ranch is too hard for her to run by herself. The poor kid starts comforting her and trying to be an adult, and actually does a better job of it than her mother. Later on that episode, when Adam is the only one who didn't drink the dingbat water and knows that a wolf pup isn't a pet, Laura asks him why it was foolish for Ward and the others to bring back the animal and then hand it over to the little girl, who, of course, is going to want to keep it. When he answers her question, she fires back at him like, how dare he act like she doesn't know whether the child should have a pet. Again, this is a wolf that she's calling a pet. Let that sink in. A wolf who she then allows Peggy to keep until it's at least a few months old and starts killing chickens for some reason. Odd, that. Next, we venture into the relationship itself between Adam and Laura. I've read that the plan was for them to marry and get their own place in order to fulfill Purnell's request for Adam to have his own adult life separate from his pa's roof and rule. The plan was to keep Will on as his replacement somewhat, and only feature Adam in certain episodes periodically going forward, leaving Purnell free to pursue the theater acting he loved. Fans did not cotton to this idea, and it was scrapped. The consensus was that we just didn't want a Cartwright to be married or live away from the others, and I'm sure that is true in some cases. I would argue, however, that it boiled down to their decision to make Laura the wife he was to settle down with. The writers tried to inject chemistry into a relationship that had but one thing going for it. They were two good-looking people who would have probably made a pretty baby Cartwright at some point. Other than that, these two not only had no zing with each other, but watching the characters in a scene together, although both Purnell and Kathy did their best, was an exercise in frustration akin to chewing the drywall of your house. These two did nothing but fight in every episode and in every scene they were in together. She threw him out of the house so many times that I found myself wanting to dunk cold water onto his head every time he kept on coming back. If they had a single thing in common or acted like they were in love at all, I might have understood a little why this man, who usually takes crap from no one, kept lapping it up with a spoon. But this video is about Laura, so we'll talk about my theories on that one later. Come back for the pressure game and triangle reviews. At some point we'll get to those. I'm going to need a break from Laura for a while after this episode, so we'll get to those eventually. Laura's maturity level honestly makes me question her compatibility with any Cartwright, even Will. Though I think they did more to sell us that relationship than they did with the one she had with Adam, I still see Will as needing a stronger woman than that. I mean, can you picture Laura going along with it once Will gets that itch that he seems to get every other couple of months to leave? Okay, so maybe settling down with the right woman and family changed all that? We'll never know, will we? Going back to the cheating game for a second, the way she behaves about little things like requiring a foreman to do his job, and then later not being able to see how suspect the thing she is about to invest her money in is, just doesn't make sense, even for her. The only theory I can come up with is that she's so determined to be on the opposite side from Adam's opinion that she's willing to lose all of her money in the process. Funny how she seems to want to keep him around and push him away, all at the same time. They act like it was Aunt Lil's idea to make Adam jealous and that the thought had never occurred to Laura before the pressure game. But isn't that sort of what she was doing with Ward in the cheating game, to the point that Ward reacted by going berserk when she turned down his marriage proposal? She throws shade at Adam for the benefit of the audience earlier in the episode, as Adam wasn't there for it, when she tells Ward that it's refreshing to have someone to talk to her like an adult and not pick on her. Some might say that Adam does do that a little, and perhaps that argument could hold water. That being said, doesn't she kind of act like a child, though? I mean, come on. The way this episode ended leads me to wonder if she wasn't the least little bit worried that when she tried that game again, this time with Will, it might blow up in her face. She had no way of knowing if Will was going to get angry and feel led on, and be mentally unstable like Ward was. Some people take it badly when you use them. It's not an excuse to behave the way Ward did. I just think that Laura should have learned her lesson. That's all I'm saying. Yes, she later falls for Will, but she hadn't admitted that to herself at the time. The first 3 out of 4 episodes she is in have the word game in the title, so I don't think the writers were entirely unaware of how manipulative she was. I don't know. That's another thing I guess we won't know. Phew, okay. So now that we've got all of those things sorted out, I feel I've had enough catharsis to start to build up a case for giving her a pinch of sympathy. In case there are some of you wondering if we'll ever get to that, don't worry. I promised you a fair and balanced look, and here at the Ponderosa Podcast, we don't lie. I do have a point or two in her favor, honestly and truly. I'm sorry. I had to go there. I just had to. She says that so much, and it's really annoying. I do give her some credit for standing up to Aunt Lil when Lil begins trying to run her life. She doesn't really stick to her guns all that much, but she does make the effort in the beginning. And her affection toward Peggy does begin to soften and make itself more known after that first episode. It's like once she deals with her feelings toward Frank and his death, she can begin to start being a better mother. Somewhat. A little. Baby steps, y'all. Baby steps. Finally, the main thing that I really started to consider during my rewatch for this video was the prospect of Laura being a sufferer of post-traumatic stress disorder due to her abusive marriage. Of course, back then these things like mental health didn't get talked about all that much, so we never really got to look into this. But one moment in particular made me wonder. The way she sort of sinks down into her chair after Adam leaves once she's convinced him to tell Peggy about Frank seems to suggest some signs of PTSD to me. I don't know, I'm no expert by any means, so I really can't say for sure. But I really think they should have maybe looked into that a little bit more. She talks to Adam about her wedding night and how afraid she was. It's understandable for a young woman to be unsure of herself during those first moments of married life, and her husband acted rather badly. It was obvious that he drank often and cheated, and I do feel sorry for her when the other woman is about to try and shake her for the money that she felt she was owed. Being a woman with very little family and a difficult marriage must have really been hard for her to cope with. I will give her that. I think her immaturity must have made it even worse for her, honestly. I can understand and even respect her for having already been in a bad marriage and not wanting to marry again unless she was sure that it was the right thing to do. I really don't think that just because she and Adam probably would never have been compatible makes her a horrible person. As much as I love Adam, if she wasn't totally happy with him and loved another, neither of them deserved to have to be in a marriage with each other under those circumstances. Many of her actions highlighted earlier in this video are questionable and they do speak to her character, but ultimately, she is a mix of traits. She's human. Perhaps a bit daft, but human. I think most fans agree that it's for the best that her character rides off into the sunset with those end credits and is never heard from again, even though they supposedly live on her ranch still. I do sort of wish that they had made her character a little bit stronger, as I would have loved to see someone face that kind of adversity and become better for it. I think she would have made a good wife for Adam in that case, and perhaps less fan backlash to the idea of him marrying her would have been thrown their way. Adam and Peggy had a fantastic relationship, so I think it could have had a lot of potential if it had been handled better. Kathy Brown seems to have a specific type of character she plays, as she's given 2 other roles on the show before Laura, and both characters remind me of Laura. So I don't know how Kathy would have done playing a different kind of woman, or at least if she'd been given some growth with all the time that they had to give her a better arc, but I wish she would have been given the chance to try, because it would have been interesting to see if she could have grown and been a better character. It's always rewarding as fans to see a character grow through their pain, especially if Adam had inspired her to do it. Well, that's why we have fan fiction. So what are your thoughts? Did you change your minds about anything after watching this? What did I get wrong? What did I get right? Did I miss anything? Drop it all down in the comments because I love hearing from you. Please remember to be kind. I know this topic can get heated amongst Adam gals. I think this is going to wind up being the longest video I've done yet. The script is already much longer than the others, and I had a feeling that it would be. I had a lot to say on this topic, and there's more that I left out in order to have something fresh to use when I get to each episode as an individual. If you watched the whole thing, especially if you really don't like Laura Dayton, thank you. I really appreciate it.